Next question is from Jordan Canigan with CTV. What is the mayor's reaction to Councillor Davison's comments yesterday linking freedom of speech to the criticism of Mr. Gray, and why was that comment wrong given what is happening across North America right now?
Well, Councillor Davison has clarified what he meant, and I don't think he meant any ill will by it. But the fact that it came out so easily, the fact that, it was easy to say that someone who has power being criticized for their opinion is the same as someone who feels that their very body and their very life is not safe in front of authority figures. That's a pretty shocking comparison to bring, especially on a day when 2,000 of our neighbors came to talk very seriously and very authentically about the challenges they face in society every single day. It really highlighted for me that even those of us who are in public positions often need a lot of education. Often we think too much about the world in which we live, and it's too easy to make comments like that without truly understanding the nature of what's being done here. So ultimately, of course, it's not the same thing. Of course, if you're going to step into the public sphere with an opinion, you can expect to be scrutinized for it. And of course, every single human being who shares this land deserves to be able to walk the streets and feel that they will get home with their life, regardless of the color of their skin. Those are not the same thing.
And Scott Dipple following up to his previous question, wondering...
Scott, good heavens.
I know. Wondering how the money will be spent and how many millions are we talking about?
Oh, Scott, I wish I had those answers for you. I believe the number for the city of Calgary is some $70-ish million. I'll find that for you, but it's part of our regular capital budgeting. There's nothing particularly new or interesting that you're going to see there.
Madeline, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, sorry, this is, and I know we're going to probably get back to Greenline, and I don't know if this is raising an issue that requires a bigger conversation, but in recent days, there's been a lot of calls for cities to talk about defunding police or at least spending less on police budgets, since they are typically the biggest budget item in any city, including Calgary. So what's your take on that conversation in light of what we're seeing given protests and whatnot right now?
It is a bigger conversation that is much deeper than what we can do in a short news clip here. But what I will say is that we have to think about what we mean by police. Does it mean sort of the militarization of our police services and the paramilitary forces, or does it also involve all of the work they do on community building, on working with at-risk youth, and so on? So the police are a complicated organization, and yes, they are our largest budget. And in every city, mayors always have trouble controlling the police budget. I will say that the Calgary Police Service has actually been very responsible in terms of managing their budget. They do not threaten. They do not push hard to get more and more and more money. They are going through a process similar to the zero-based review process that we've talked about to make sure that they are operating well with taxpayer dollars. That's part of the question. I know that's not really what you're asking, but I think ultimately a lot of the calls to defund the police are really calls to say, how do we spend money on community development? How do we think about safety in a different way than traditional policing? And I happen to think the Canadian police services, but particularly the Calgary Police Service, ever since the time of Chief Rick Hansen and before, have actually been very good at that and have really been very thoughtful about thinking of community safety in a broader way than just boots on the street. And I think that is a conversation they too would be happy to have to share what they know. I know, Adam, these folks probably want to get back to the Greenline Committee, the really exciting ones as well. So if there's one or two more questions, we can wrap them. Otherwise, we'll take them. Otherwise, we can wrap up.
Madeline, did you have a follow-up? Okay.
I do.
So we one more from Scott. How can the city afford to borrow the money in today's borrowing bylaw recommendation? If the federal government front ends its contribution, does that reduce the need to borrow?
Great question. And so the answer is that the federal government has to front end their contribution. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work. And then we're really going to have a problem. Ultimately, the borrowing bylaw before us today assumes a cash flow where the federal and provincial governments stick to their promises and allows us to be able to borrow going forward. So there's not really much change in what's before us today than there has been in the past. I strongly believe that the federal government and the provincial government will come to an agreement in terms of that cash flow and the federal government coming in first and the province coming in after. But we will really need to have that confirmed. And frankly, if we don't have that confirmed by Q3, we won't be able to award any contracts. But I don't want to sound like the sky is falling. I think that will get itself sorted out.
And with that, Mayor Nenshi, thank you very much for making the time. We'll let you head back to committee.
Thanks, everyone, for our first virtual scrum. Going back to committee now.